Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Morris and I am going to teach you how to paint and draw. So I really like to get into the nitty-gritty of things, and I'm not just going to teach you how to draw specific things like birds or butterflies or how to draw a cat, but rather I'm going to teach you the concepts and the theories that will help you paint and draw anything. So let's get started. So first, one of the main things is your tools. So today I just have a little piece of vine charcoal. You can get this at an art store or your local craft store. And this is actually a piece of wood that has been fired and then taken out of the fire and cooled before it actually turns to just ash. Now when I get a nice new piece, I just break it in half just so that I have a manageable piece. And then the thing you want to know about the charcoal, or this is vine charcoal, is that it's a very loose and soft material. So when you make a line, it's not going to stay, it's going to loosen up and not be permanent, which is really good for experiments and also for learning. So now let's get started. I just have a nice clean piece of paper. And again, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about being perfect. Rather, we're learning. And so I have this leaf here. Now, a lot of people will say just in their tutorials how to draw a leaf. So they'll say, you know, start with a shape and maybe draw the outline and then the center, and then you have this sort of symbol, a symbol for a leaf. But it's not specifically this leaf. So one of the things that we do in art is this thing called a gesture. A gesture is simply the overall shape, the overall movement of the shape, and capturing the whole thing all at once. So for me, capturing this shape would just simply be just putting my tool down and just quickly and simply grabbing this shape. Now, of course, it doesn't look exactly like it, but me making this movement, me thinking about how this shape exists in space, is actually teaching me about this object. Now, you can see it is starting to resemble the shape. This is the gesture of the shape. Now, the other thing that you want to think about is the structure of an object. So when you look at something, you want to imagine that you can sort of define or see the center line. And this is not arbitrary. I'm not creating this center line out of nowhere. I'm referring back to this shape. So I might even, let's start talking about measuring. So just thinking about where it starts and where it stops, that center line. Now it's nice to always figure out where the longest part is and where the widest part is. So again, I'm just gonna move this over slightly, move this over. So we have the longest part of this object, and then let's now go for the widest. So just suggest the widest part, and this could be any object, and this is a more two-dimensional shape. As we continue these videos, we'll talk more and more about three-dimensional shapes and forms. So just imagining where the widest part is and also the longest part. And then there's this thing called a contour line, the line that goes around the edge. And the point of a contour line is to not just imagine or create the symbol of the leaf, but really feel like as if you're touching your tool to the piece. So for example, I'm going to go along and I'm not going to invent what I see. Rather, I'm going to interpret and really feel as though I'm touching this object. So you can see this little dip in the leaf shape goes around and then keeps going up. And there's a little point. And at the end of the day, you do realize that I'm going to take this leaf away. It's no longer going to exist. All that's going to be left is my picture. So it doesn't actually have to be so exact, but if you want to create something that actually looks real, you're going to need to slow down and really observe how a thing exists in space. Now notice how this leaf is starting to lift up. So I'm going to, at this widest point, so I have imagined a line where the widest point of this leaf is. So I'm just going to now come down at this end. And again, I'm just thinking about that contour line. I've given myself some markings where the longest point and the widest point is. And maybe I'll start to move around so that I'm not getting lost in small details. Rather, I'm thinking about the whole piece. Notice that the center of this stem is wider towards the bottom, so I might even add that detail, that it gets wider. Again, this is just going to wipe away. It's really just so that you can start to think out loud, I like to say. And so this little leaflet, it actually curves over to the side, and then it has this element, and then it starts to lift up. And then you see these veins here. And I'm not going to just make a symbol of what I think a leaf should look like. I'm really going to look at where the lines are on the piece. I'm going to observe what I see and try to record it. And as the line moves out, it actually becomes thinner and lighter. So one of the things is you have to know or start to learn the actual pressure that you're using with your tools. So if something is lighter, thinner, then your tool, you want to emulate that in what you're doing with your tool. So now this gets a little wider here, so I'm going to go a little wider, and it starts to lift up into this area. Again, at any point in time, I can just wipe it away if I don't like it, because it's with this bind charcoal. And I do like to move around. Again, this lifts up a little bit, so I'm even thinking about drawing it as though it lifts up, and then it goes down a bit as it touches the table, and then lifts up. So there's a sense of tactility in the way that you're drawing, the way that you observe something, that you're actually trying to emulate that in how you manipulate your tool. And go slow. Take a deep breath and relax. It doesn't have to be perfect. At the end of the day, you're going to take your object away, or your photo. And you see how all of these little veins here, they sort of trail off. So I'm just getting lighter and trailing off, moving up, trying to follow. The thing about nature and real life is that it has a tendency to be so dramatic. If we really slow down and pay attention, we'll tend to sort of even out all of these veins. But nature knows how to sort of offset it to make it more interesting. So pay attention to those details. Again, just lifting this up. Now this comes over a little bit, so I'm going to actually bring the line so that as if it's curling over. You can see this line here is now starting to twirl or turn upwards. keeping it light. There's even a little bit of a shadow underneath. I might go in and just sort of put that little line for the shadow and darken it just a bit. And then what's also nice with this fine charcoal, it's so light, you can see I can just wipe away the lines. But it can be a nice tool to use to create a really delicate light piece. And again, it makes it so that nothing is really sort of sentimental or stuck in stone. It's really, this fine charcoal is really a tool for you to be able to start thinking out loud and learning how to draw. So again, just going along. Another thing in art that we want to think about is the line quality. So I'm giving all of these little slight brush strokes, I call them, or line strokes, just going very slowly. But you can have a timid line and you can have a more confident line. Sort of play with that, going back and forth. If I just go very timidly and slow, it's going to have much different type or quality line than if I go really fast or loose. Again, so just playing with following the lines, taking my time. At some point I kind of got lost in where the leaf was starting and stopping. Oh, and now if I even look closer, there's a little rounded line, and actually that's quite long and thin, and I've got it kind of fat here. So this is the point. You used to go in. Adjusting is a huge part of drawing, not being so strict that you don't allow it to change or to transform into what it is. And as we continue through this series and we develop more and more skills, you'll learn that some of these things that we talk about in actual drawing from life are basis or the bricks to creating abstract work. So I do teach abstract painting. I've been teaching that for over 10 years. And sometimes I have students that come to me that have never learned how to draw. And they are years behind the students that do know how to draw. There are different concepts and ideas and theories that you learn in drawing, in observing from life, just this idea of quality of line, of slowing down, the characteristic of a line. So that's looking pretty hot. Again, just taking my time and really following through to build this leaf shape. Again, we have this leaf shape that kind of curls up, and then I want to, now I've drawn the lines on the inside here. I have not drawn the outside of the leaf shape. So I'm just going to go along now and sort of capture and grab that contour line, that line that runs on the edge. And I'm not just drawing it arbitrarily, I am literally pretending that my tool is touching the edge of that object, and I'm marking it and marking my experience of observing that onto the page. Soften that out. And what's really wonderful is that when you actually draw in this way, there's that back side of that leaf. You can kind of rub things out with this fine charcoal, make it real light and loose. So that's looking pretty hot. Now what gets really exciting, so now I have the basis of this leaf you see here. Now what I can do is go in with an eraser now. So let's see if I have an eraser in my toolbox here. So I have a bunch of toolboxes, and you should also have a toolbox for your materials to store your things in. So let's see what I have here. Ooh, I have a funky black eraser. So let's try that. This little basics. I have no idea where this came from. Hopefully it will work. All right, so now what I can do is, do you see how this line is lighter? Now I can go in and use my eraser as a drawing tool. And I'm actually going to take an X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut it like so, so that I have more of a point to play with. You can use either one, more of a point. And now I can use this as a drawing tool. So it's not always about adding with your charcoal pencils or markers. Sometimes it's about subtracting. So now I can go in here and nice and neatly sort of draw that lighter line. And I can go along and now draw some of these other lines that are lighter. To create the nuance. Now again, if I wanted to keep this in any kind of sort of permanent condition, because this vine charcoal is not going to do the trick, so I'm just going along and lightening up these little lines here because they're not dark, they're light in the actual object. And I might even go on and sort of carve this out because that's actually much thinner than the way I had it drawn. And then now we're talking about sort of negative space. So going around on the edge here and cutting this out, carving this object out is actually, we start talking about the negative space, the space around the object. And you could see how I could now go around and really create some really clear, clean edges with my cut piece. And if there's any other nuances that I wanted to create. So I'm just blowing it away, and this was actually lighter than I had drawn it. And I don't like that I put that shadow in there. It's making it look kind of wonky and a little heavy, so I'm gonna lighten that up. Now say I wanted to keep this little leaflet, and I've used the vine charcoal. A solution would be to use something more permanent. So let's see here. If I use a little, this is just some compressed charcoal. So this is going to be much darker, and you can see it's more permanent. And if I go very dark, if I push very hard with my hands, then it's going to create a very dark line. If I go light, I can create a lighter line. And if I go very light and delicate, I can create even more of a delicate line. So if I want to now go back in and remember that time I took to create that light line, I don't want to now erase that or get rid of it. So maybe I'll go in and just sort of go around that element. Creating these sort of veins in this. And this leaf here, if you're interested, is a hydrangea leaf. Sort of took that in this morning with a bunch of little hydrangea flowers. Again, the world is a rich source of inspiration. All you have to do is look around. I love nature, but you may like more cityscapes or city scenes or people. Now I'm just going along and kind of rubbing this in just to kind of secure it into place. Get it sort of so it sticks. And again, a nice drawing takes time. especially if you want the details. Now you could have left it in the very beginning, we did the gesture. You could have left it at the gesture, and that could have been an abstract sort of suggestion of a leaf. You wouldn't have to go into this detail. Now I have gone a little bit too thick here in my over drawing. So again, you can always sort of erase or soften. I'm just going to lightly sort of bring this mark around the edge just to solidify it and give it just that darkness. I'm also going to leave some space and air in between the marks. That will help to create just some lightness, and if we just make a big line around something, that's not really how things exist in space. So this is sort of flattens out the shape. By keeping some things open, it gives it some more life and light. And this is looking pretty good. You may have one of these sort of fancy rubbing tools, and you might go in and just soften some of these lines. You can use it as another way to draw, to run this tool over your marks. So just go slow, and still, again, always observe. Look over at your object that you're drawing. Then I might go back in and just lighten up some of these darker lines, just because it doesn't exist like that. They're too heavy, and I want this leaf to have a sort of lifelike feel to it. Now I'm going to take my charcoal again. There's all these little veins in this thing, so I'm just going to just run my tool lightly in the same way as they feel in the leaf. This light sort of veiny stuff that's happening through the leaf. Now you could go super slow and pull out all of these little teeny tiny little veins in the leaf, if that's your MO. I am sort of less into those sort of details. And again, at the end of the day, this leaf disappears, and all that you're left in your drawing is your marks. No one is ever going to see the actual object that you referenced. So now you can spend some time just perfecting and making this object what you'd like it to be. So there we go. One of our first lessons, Drawing 101. See you next time.